Pick number four, Gary, we're moving back to the Bank of Japan. The BoJ is finally considering raising rates again. Bigger rate increase than last time?
Well, the last time, what did they went from negative to 0.05%.
Oh, you're giving them too much credit, I feel like.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it's 0.02 or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was something insane. I think it was
Something like that.
0.05%.
We'll look it up later.
Yeah, it was something insane, right? They telegraphed it. We're going to raise rates. We're going to go positive. We're going to go positive. We're going to raise rates. And then,
That's what it was. Go
yeah,
positive. That's right.
right. And they ended up like between 0 and 0.1%. So at the
They went
midpoint, it
positive.
was, yeah, they did it. But anyway, so needless to say, that effort did not help. The yen kept falling. I think, last time I looked, it was 157 yen to the dollar. Just a couple of years ago, it was 102, 103 yen to the dollar. So their currency has fallen more than 50% against the dollar in 2 years. Then what they did was they blew through tens of billions of dollars of foreign currency reserves in an attempt to defend the yen. So the way that works for people who aren't so familiar with this is, Japan, they're holding lots and lots of foreign currency, and a lot of that is in dollars. So what they were doing is they were selling dollars or selling US treasuries, which is, a way to hold dollars, and then using the funds they got from that to buy the yen. And that would strengthen the yen. The issue is because the Bank of Japan didn't address the underlying problem, right? The underlying imbalance in their economy. Those efforts would typically work for somewhere between 24 and 48 hours, right? This is like, if you were a football player and you had a bad injury, they might be your trainer might be able to give you a steroid shot or a numbing shot, in your shoulder or your knee to allow you to play, but that doesn't fix the injury, right? By the time the game is over, you're going to be in pain again and still haven't gone through the hard work that you have to go through in physical therapy. That's the situation they're in now. So they blow tens of billions of dollars and it buys them a small reprieve for 1 to 2 days, and then everything falls back the way it is. So they're looking for their next inflation report, and they're talking about raising rates again. And what we've seen is I've got a chart here. Andrew is going to put up the chart, but the yield on the Japanese 10-year government bond this year has gone from 60 basis points or 0.6% to almost 1.1%. That's a big change, in just 5 months. So, and they're going to have to raise it again. Whether they do or not this time, I don't know, but at some point they're going to have to.
I've seen some conversations on X and just other platforms that there is some mirroring between, what Japan and the US look like compared to one another. Obviously, different scales in terms of size, but any similarities with the situations one way or the other, Gary?
There absolutely is. The issue with Japan is because they ran such low interest rates and even negative interest rates for almost a decade, they were able to run up huge debt. The Japanese debt is something like 260% of GDP. Well, the problem is when we started to get inflation in the US and the UK and the EU, all of the central banks started to raise rates. The Bank of Japan couldn't raise rates. And the reason is with debt to GDP of 260%, they weren't able to. If your debt is that high, higher rates will crush your budget. So they couldn't afford it. And as a result, they kept their interest rates ultra low for until very recently negative. And what that did was that crashed their currency. And that's generally a problem, but it's a huge problem in a small island nation without a lot in the way of natural resources, without a lot of fuel. And so that created huge problems for them. And now they're really stuck because if they don't raise rates, their currency is going to continue falling, and that's going to make life pretty expensive. If they do raise rates, well, guess what? With debt that high, they can't afford it. And so these are the same problems we have here in the United States. We wrote an ebook in the fourth quarter last year called Counterintuitive Inflation, explaining how in the US our debt is so high that if the Federal Reserve hikes rates, it's going to increase our interest expense. That will increase government debt. that will lead to more currency printing, and guess what? More inflation. So we're trapped here in the same way Japan is. It's just for them, the problem is much larger, and they're going to need to deal with it before we do. But at some point, everybody in the Western world is going to have to deal with this problem. Not just Japan, not just the US. The UK has similar problems. The EU has even bigger problems than the UK. But it's going to be Japan where we see these issues first. But everybody's facing the same dilemmas for the same reasons.